we're asked if A is B percent of C, then in terms of A and C, B is what percent of C. So this is another percent translation question. It's a word problem with percents. It's a lot more difficult than the one we've done in previous video because it's a lot more abstract, but the same general strategy applies. What you want to do is you want to remember that there's 4 key words that occur in most percent questions, and you want to know their mathematical equivalents. And those words are what, is, of, and percent. Whenever you see what, you want to replace that with a variable. Whenever you see is, you want to replace that with an equal sign. If you see of, you want to replace that with a multiplication sign. And percent means divide by 100. So we're told here that A is B percent of C. A is B percent of C. And the word percent and the symbol percent are equivalent. You can use either one. The reason this question is difficult, or much more difficult than the one we previously done in a previous video, is there's no numbers here. So a good strategy would be to pick some numbers, to substitute numbers in for the unknowns. This is one way you can tell that this is the proper strategy is to look at the answer choices. If the answer choices contain variables, then it's a good idea to pick numbers for the variables in the answer choices. So here, let's pretend, so we're finding B percent of C, so our total is C, our whole is C. Let's pretend that's 200, and let's pretend that B is 20. So what we're doing is we're saying that A is, so A is 20% of C, or A is 20% of 200. So 20% of 200, we can knock out the 0 over here, 0 over here. A is equal to 2 times 20. So A is 40. Let's write that down here. A is 40, and we picked B to be 20 and C to be 200. The question is then, B is what percent of C? So let's write that now. B is what percent of C? Well, we just said that B was 20. So the question is 20 is what percent of, so that's 1% of 200. We can reduce this like so. So the question then becomes 20 is equal to x times 2, or 20 is equal to 2x. And that tells us that x is 10 when you divide both sides by 2. What they're asking for is this unknown. So the question is asking for x, for the unknown we put in, and we got an answer of 10. None of the answer choices, however, have just 10 in it. They all have C and A and some powers of 10 in there. So what we'll do then is, let's get rid of these. Let's clear up some space. What we'll do is we'll put numbers in and see which answer choice gives us 10. So C over A becomes 200 over 40, which is 5, and we want 10, so answer choice A is out. This becomes 100 times 200 and divided by A, which is 40. Again, 200 divided by 40 is 5, so this becomes 500, so that's out. This is going to be 10,000 times A, which is 40, divided by C, which is 200. So I'll knock this 0 out in this one, this is 0 out in this one, and 2 in the 4th becomes 2, so it's 2 times 1,000, which is 2,000. Again, we want 10, so answer choice C is out. 100 times A is going to give us 100 times 40 divided by 100 times A over C divided by 200. So I'll knock out these two zeros. This is going to be 10 times 40 over 2. 40 divided by 2 is 20, so this is 10 times 20, or 200. Again, we just want 10, so hopefully E works. E is 10,000 times A times 40 divided by C squared divided by 200 squared, or 200 times 200. So let's cancel the zeros out. This is 0, and this is 0, and this is 0, and this 0, and this 0, and this 0. So what we have is 10 times 4, or 40, divided by 2 times 2, which is 4, and that's 10, and that is the correct answer choice. So once again, what we did was we rewrote these two statements, A is B percent of C and B is what percent of C, using our percent translation method, just translating the words that you commonly see in percent questions into their mathematical equivalents. We then picked numbers for B and C and figured out what A was. Using that, we figured out what B is what percent of C, and then plugged the numbers we figured out into the answer choices to see which gave us 10, which is, using the numbers we had, the percent that B is of C, so B was 10% of C.